They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies, but inside these concrete walls, ADX Florence hides something far darker than isolation. Men who enter don't just lose their freedom. Some say they lose their minds. Former inmates describe it as a mental furnace, a place where silence screams, shadows breathe, and time stops obeying the rules. Today we uncover how the world's most secure prison indoctrinates the human mind, without ever laying a hand on you. Before we go any deeper, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the story you're about to hear is built on real interviews, declassified documents, and survivor testimony that rarely reaches the outside world. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. A convoy moves like a shadow through the Colorado desert. 3 vehicles, bulletproof, windows blacked out, tires humming against the empty highway leading toward the quiet town of Florence. Inside the middle SUV sits a man who hasn't felt fresh air without bars in years. His wrists are shackled. His ankles too. A chain connects the two. Even his waist is secured with a thick metal belt. The U.S. Marshals don't take chances with anyone headed to this facility. Because ADX Florence isn't just a prison. It's the final stop for the most dangerous inmates in the federal system. Officially, it's called the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility. Unofficially, it's where the government sends people they never want to see walking free again. As the convoy reaches the outer gate, a line of high fences begins to rise from the landscape like skeletons made of razor wire. Cameras track the vehicles from every angle. Motion sensors flicker. Snipers watch silently from elevated towers positioned to cover every inch of the perimeter. Each security layer is designed to do one thing: erase any thought of escape from the human mind. But here's the part outsiders never understand. ADX Florence isn't designed to break bodies. It's designed to break behavior. Inmates aren't beaten or threatened into compliance. The indoctrination comes from the architecture, the routine, the isolation, the silence. Officers who once worked there describe the place as a machine built to reshape a human being into something predictable, controllable, and quiet. When the gates finally open, the convoy moves into the Sally Port. A massive steel door slides shut behind them before another opens. No one enters or leaves without the entire building knowing about it. At ADX, every movement triggers an alert, every sound is recorded, and every inmate is watched more closely than some heads of state. The new prisoner, we'll call him Ramon, is escorted out. His eyes blink against the bright sun. For a brief second, he takes in the sight of the concrete monolith looming over him. The building has no aesthetic, no softness, no color beyond death gray. It looks like something carved deliberately to intimidate. And it works. Inside the processing area, officers speak in short commands. They don't raise their voices, they don't need to. The environment itself amplifies every order. Step forward. Hands out. Don't move. Ramon is scanned, photographed, searched, and medically evaluated in under 40 minutes. Everything is streamlined. Everything is efficient. The staff here aren't correctional officers in the traditional sense. They're specialists trained for the highest-risk inmates in the federal system. Terrorists, gang leaders, international criminals, escape artists, and individuals whose names have appeared on worldwide news. When the door to his new unit slides open, he enters a world he's heard rumors about but never believed. A narrow hallway stretches forward. The air is cold. The walls are thick enough to drown out every human voice. There are no communal showers. No yard in the traditional sense. No cafeteria. Every inmate is kept alone, in a concrete cell about the size of a small bathroom, for 23 hours a day. As he's led to his cell, Ramon glimpses the others, hardened men peering through steel doors with slit-sized windows. But he doesn't hear them. Not a word. Not a whisper. Not even a cough. Because in ADX Florence, silence isn't just enforced, it's weaponized. The door shuts behind him with a deep, echoing thud. And that's when he realizes the truth that former inmates have repeated for decades. This isn't punishment. This is psychological engineering. ADX Florence doesn't simply confine people. It reprograms them. Ramon's first night inside ADX Florence is unlike anything he's ever experienced, and he's done time in some of the toughest state prisons in America. But nothing prepares a man for the silence here. It isn't normal silence. It's engineered silence. Designed. Calculated. Purpose-built to strip away every distraction except the walls around you. Every former inmate who has spoken publicly says the same thing. ADX is the only prison where the building itself feels alive. It starts with the cell. 9 feet long. 7 feet wide. Everything inside molded from solid concrete. The bed, the desk, the stool. The toilet is stainless steel, bolted into the ground. The sink produces water on a timer, you can't let it run freely. The mirror is polished metal, too warped to show a clear reflection. Even the window, if you can call it that, is a narrow vertical slit angled upward so you can see the sky but never the horizon. That design is intentional. Inmates can't see freedom. They can't even see distance. Just clouds drifting by like strangers. Ramon tests the walls with his knuckles. 2 taps, sharp and quick. Nothing echoes. No vibration. No hint that anyone exists beyond the concrete. The facility was built with acoustic dampening, layers of reinforced material designed to keep sound from traveling. Even if the guy next door is screaming, you might not hear him. And if you do, it'll sound like it's coming from 100 miles away. The indoctrination begins on day 1. At 5 a.m., the lights flick on without warning. No sunrise. No slow transition. Just a white glare so bright it slices through your eyelids. A voice crackles through the speaker. Stand for count. That's the first rule of ADX. Routine is God. It runs everything. It organizes your sense of time. It rewires your brain until you think in schedules instead of moments. When officers arrive at Ramon's door, they look through the tiny plexiglass panel, verify he's alive, then move on. No conversation. No human softness. Just procedure. ADX officers are trained never to show emotion or engage in personal talk. Not because they're cold, but because emotional distance is a survival tactic. A guard who gets close to an inmate in a place like this becomes a liability, for himself and for the staff. At 7 a.m., breakfast arrives through a rectangular slot at the bottom of the cell door. Ramon crouches, takes the tray, and sees what every ADX inmate sees each day: trays that slide in from nowhere, hands he never sees, footsteps he can't track. The system is designed so inmates rarely, if ever, make eye contact with staff. The less they see, the less they learn. The less they learn, the less they resist. After breakfast, he sits on the small concrete ledge that serves as his seat. There's nothing to do except wait. Wait for the next meal. Wait for the next count. Wait for the 1 hour of recreation that may or may not come, depending on staffing. That 1 hour takes place in what inmates call the concrete dog run, an outdoor cage the size of a parking space, surrounded by fencing and more concrete. If the weather is bad, recreation happens in a day room, which is basically another cell with no bed. And even then you're alone. Former inmate Jack Powers, who later became one of the most well-known voices speaking out about ADX conditions, once said, "You don't see another human face for years. Sometimes decades. You forget how tall people are. You forget how to read body language. You start talking to yourself just to hear another voice." That's not hyperbole. That's documented testimony. In Ramon's first week, he begins to notice something chilling. His sense of time starts slipping. Days blend. Meals taste the same. The silence becomes so heavy that his mind tries filling the gaps with imagined sounds. Footsteps, whispers, a door closing in the distance. Psychologists who've studied solitary confinement explain it like this. When the brain is deprived of stimulation, it begins creating its own. It's a survival mechanism. But inside ADX, it feels like a trap. The indoctrination is subtle but powerful. You learn that speaking gets you nothing. You learn that asking questions leads nowhere. You learn that routine is the only thing you can depend on. You learn that the walls don't care, and neither does the system. And once a man accepts that truth, ADX considers the mission accomplished. Because this facility has one purpose: to turn unpredictable men into predictable ones. By the end of week 2, Ramon understands the unspoken law every inmate eventually learns. You don't beat ADX. ADX beats you. And when it does, you don't even hear it happening. You just feel it, slowly, moving in. By the time Ramon reaches his 3rd week inside ADX, he has started to understand something that outsiders almost never grasp. The real power of the prison isn't the steel, the concrete, or even the isolation. It's the system that controls every second of your existence. A system so tightly structured that even your thoughts begin aligning with its rhythm. The Bureau of Prisons calls it step-down compliance conditioning. Former correctional officers, psychologists, and inmates all describe it differently, but they point to the same truth. ADX Florence is built to take the most violent, unpredictable, high-profile prisoners in the country and grind them down into quiet, manageable, compliant individuals. And the method is simple. Control everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and do, until you stop resisting. The soundscape of obedience. Around week 3, Ramon starts noticing patterns he didn't recognize at first. Sounds, or the lack of them, become clues. Footsteps in ADX are rare. Shouts are rare. Conversations? Practically non-existent. Unlike regular prisons where noise is constant, ADX is a vacuum. A sensory drought. Former inmate Thomas Silverstein, one of the most isolated prisoners in U.S. history, wrote letters describing it as a place where silence is so heavy it presses on your skull. You feel it in your bones. That wasn't metaphor. That was his daily reality for over 20 years in special holding units. Ramon experiences it too. He begins hearing his own heartbeat when the lights turn off. He starts imagining footsteps that aren't there. Once, he swears he hears someone humming, but when he presses his ear to the wall, it's just the blood rushing through his own head. Silence becomes loud. Louder than any fight he ever heard in a prison yard. Psychologists say the brain reacts this way to extreme isolation because it's designed to process sensory input. When the input stops, the mind creates its own. Some inmates report hearing voices. Others hear music. Others swear they hear staff walking by even when the hallway is empty. The prison doesn't correct you. It doesn't tell you what's real. Because that confusion? That's part of the programming. The routine becomes religion. Every morning at 5 a.m., the lights blast on again. Same brightness. Same angle. Same burning sensation behind his eyelids. The routine is so precise that Ramon can predict every beep, every buzz, every tray slot opening. You don't get to choose anything, when you sleep, when you wake, when you shower, when you move, when you eat. In ADX, predictability isn't comfort. It's control. Officers deliver food through the slot. Medical staff speak through a panel. Showers are scheduled behind electronically controlled doors. If you're lucky, recreation is scheduled. If not, you sit in the concrete box until the next count. Men who once commanded entire criminal organizations. Men who orchestrated violent acts. Men who lived by impulse or dominance. Are now living on a clock set by someone else. And the system never misses a beat. One former ADX officer summed it up. You don't teach them to behave. You teach them they don't have any other option. The psychological drift. It's around this time that Ramon begins noticing something more alarming. His thoughts are changing. Not breaking but drifting. He no longer thinks about escape. No longer thinks about the outside. No longer imagines possibilities. He thinks about the tray slot. He thinks about the next head count. He thinks about the rec cage. His world shrinks to about 12 feet by 7 feet. This transformation has been documented in multiple psychological evaluations. Inmates kept in long-term solitary at ADX often experience distorted sense of time, emotional numbness, memory lapses, trouble focusing, paranoia, hallucinations under sensory deprivation, increasing dependency on routine, decreasing sense of personal identity. In a lawsuit, one former ADX prisoner said, "You stop being a man and start being a schedule." Ramon feels that happening to him. Slowly. Like someone turning the volume down on his personality bit by bit. The no-contact human experience. In a regular high-security prison, you still talk to people. You see faces. You interact during meals, at the yard, during programs. At ADX, human contact is rare, sometimes non-existent. Officers don't converse. Medical staff keep interactions clinical. Other inmates are ghosts behind layers of concrete and steel. This isolation isn't accidental. It's the foundation of the indoctrination process. If you remove relationships, you remove rebellion. If you remove community, you remove strength. If you remove communication, you remove influence. If you remove sensory input, you remove identity. ADX cuts the wires one by one, until the human being is unplugged from the world. The first breaking point. It hits Ramon during his 4th week. He's staring at the wall, watching sunlight crawl from one corner of the cell to the other, the only way he can estimate the time. Suddenly, he realizes he hasn't spoken out loud in days. Maybe more than a week. Not a word. Not even to himself. His throat feels tight, like it forgot how to form sound. He opens his mouth to say something, anything, but no words come out. The silence has rewired him so deeply that speaking feels unnatural. For a moment, panic rises in his chest. His breath quickens. His hands tremble. This moment is common among ADX inmates. Documented. Repeated. Confirmed. A psychological break isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Quiet. Internal. That's when Ramon learns the harshest truth of all. ADX Florence doesn't wait for you to lose your mind. It trains you to hand it over voluntarily. By the 5th week, Ramon is no longer just living in the ADX system. He's thinking inside it. The transformation is quiet, almost invisible, and that's what makes it terrifying. Not because the prison forces it, but because the mind adapts on its own. ADX doesn't break people loudly. It erodes them silently. And the erosion starts with the most overlooked but psychologically devastating part of the cell. The window. At a glance, it's nothing. A narrow vertical slit sealed behind multiple layers of thick security glass, barely wide enough to fit the width of 2 fingers. It's angled upward so Ramon can see one thing and one thing only. The sky. Not a tree. Not a wall. Not a building. Not another human being. Not even the yard. Just sky. It seems harmless. Maybe even peaceful. But it's one of the most powerful control mechanisms inside ADX. Psychologists who studied sensory restriction call it horizon deprivation. Without the ability to see distance or depth, the brain begins losing its natural sense of space and placement. It becomes harder to imagine the outside world. Harder to visualize movement. Harder to picture life. Former inmate Richard Reed described it like this in letters. The sky is the only proof the world still exists. Everything else feels like a memory I can't trust. Ramon feels that too. Day after day he sits on the concrete bed, staring upward. Clouds pass. They don't drift peacefully, they float like reminders of a reality he's no longer part of. On windy days the cloud formations twist quickly, but from inside the cement bunker he can't feel a single breeze. He sees motion but not its cause. The mind hates contradictions. And ADX feeds inmates a never-ending stream of them. You can see the sky, but never feel it. You can hear the speaker, but never see a face. You can receive orders, but never ask questions. You can rage, but your voice dies in the concrete. This constant sensory conflict slowly pulls the brain into a state psychologists call perceptual disintegration. It sounds dramatic, but it's not. It's subtle, creeping. You barely notice it happening. The external world starts to fade. Around this time, Ramon realizes he hasn't thought about cities, streets, or people in days. He hasn't pictured a car, a store, a crowd, or even a simple conversation. Those memories still exist, but they're blurry, like they happened to someone else. This fading effect has been documented in federal reports, court testimony, and psychological evaluations of long-term isolated inmates. When the brain spends too much time without environmental input, it starts compressing or discarding memories that no longer feel relevant. The mind adapts to the environment it has. And in ADX, the environment is a vacuum. Former prisoner Farrokh Mohammed, who spent years in the Special Security Unit, described it perfectly. You don't forget who you were. You just stop needing him. For Ramon, that moment arrives when he tries to imagine his mother's face and realizes he can't remember the exact shape of her smile. It hits him so hard he sits down on the concrete floor, breathing slowly, trying to pull her image back into focus. But it doesn't return clearly. Details fall apart the harder he tries. That's when he whispers for the first time in days. Don't forget, don't forget. His voice is hoarse, almost foreign, like he borrowed it from someone else. The books, the letters, the illusion of choice. During his 6th week, Ramon is approved to receive reading material, but it's not as comforting as the outside world imagines. Books are censored, pages inspected, bindings checked. Only certain magazines are allowed. Photographs must meet strict standards. Letters are reviewed. Everything is filtered. But here's the key. The monotony of the isolation makes even the most interesting book feel hollow. Former inmates report that reading becomes difficult in deep isolation. Concentration fades. Words blur. Thoughts drift. Some describe reading entire pages and realizing they didn't absorb a single sentence. That's not laziness, it's cognitive fatigue. Ramon experiences this too. He gets a book about history. He opens it, reads half a page, stops, looks at the window, tries again. Stops. The words slide around his brain like they don't know where to land. His mind has rewired itself around containment, not exploration. The program review cycle. Every few weeks, ADX inmates undergo a program review. On paper, it's a chance to evaluate their behavior, adjust restrictions, determine if they qualify for less isolated units. But in practice, it's another psychological checkmate. The review happens with Ramon locked in a booth, separated by thick glass from officials who've studied his behavior through reports, camera footage, disciplinary logs, and cell checks. They don't ask about mental health. They don't ask about loneliness. They don't ask about fear. They ask one question repeatedly. Are you compliant? If the answer is yes, the cycle continues. If the answer is no, the cycle deepens. The system creates a reality where obedience is the only path toward any form of relief. But even when inmates follow every rule for years, progression out of ADX units is slow, bureaucratic, and often denied. It's hope on a leash. And the leash is short. The identity collapse. By his 7th week, Ramon finally says it out loud. I don't feel like myself anymore. This is a milestone inmates don't forget. The moment you stop recognizing your own internal voice. The moment you feel like you're shrinking. The moment your thoughts become quieter, smaller, contained. ADX Florence doesn't teach obedience through violence. It teaches obedience by stripping away everything except the prison itself. Walls become your world. Silence becomes your language. Routine becomes your identity. Ramon isn't broken. He's dissolving. And he doesn't even realize how far it will go. By the time Ramon crosses into his 8th week inside ADX Florence, his mind has begun shifting in ways he never expected. At first it was small things, losing track of time, forgetting details, drifting mid-thought. But now something new is happening. Something every long-term ADX inmate talks about, whether in court filings, letters, or rare interviews. The mind begins creating company. Not voices. Not hallucinations. Not the dramatic movie version of losing grip. This is something quieter. More subtle. More dangerous. Psychologists refer to it as self-dialogue fragmentation. Inmates have another word for it. The second voice. Not a hallucination. Not an imaginary friend. It's simply the brain trying to recreate the feedback loop it used to get from other people. Tone changes, responses, pushback, laughter, disagreement. Deprived of human interaction for too long, the mind starts producing internal versions of it. Ramon doesn't notice when it begins. No one ever does. It starts with a question he silently asks himself. Did I lock the sink timer after washing? Then another one. Why am I thinking about this so much? Then one day he's pacing, tracing imaginary lines on the concrete floor, and he catches himself whispering, "No, that doesn't make sense." And he freezes. Who was he talking to? The room feels colder suddenly. His heartbeat thumps in his ears. The silence presses harder. He sits down on the concrete stool and tries to catch his breath. This moment, the first time he realizes he's having a conversation with himself, is a breaking point many ADX survivors describe vividly. Former inmate Brian Nichols once said in a legal declaration, "Your thoughts start answering your thoughts. Not like voices, but like you're split in two." The Bureau of Prisons denies ADX causes long-term psychological injury. But hundreds of pages of testimony, clinical evaluations, and appeals from prisoners tell a different story. And Ramon is living it now. The walls become participants. Isolation at ADX isn't passive. It shapes the way the mind functions. Without stimuli, the brain reaches outward, grabbing onto whatever patterns exist. Shadows. Sounds. Light shifts. Repetitive noises. The slight hum of ventilation becomes a clock. The echo in the metal sink becomes a presence. Ramon starts interpreting the tiny sounds as signals, not because he's delusional but because the brain is desperate for structure. He notices. The ventilation clicks at nearly the same minute every hour. The hallway temperature drops slightly around 10 p.m. A soft mechanical whir happens after every morning count. Some nights, a faint tapping sound travels through the plumbing system. He begins assigning meaning to these patterns. Not supernatural meaning. Not paranoid meaning. Just meaning. Because a human mind without stimulation invents structure. In letters smuggled out of the control unit, inmate Jack Powers wrote, "When every day is identical, any tiny change feels like communication." For Ramon, it becomes a coping mechanism. A way to navigate the endless monotony. But it's also the beginning of something deeper, and far more dangerous. Dreams start replacing memories. Around week 10, Ramon notices another shift. His dreams become vivid, painfully vivid, while his real-life memories start losing color. This phenomenon is widely reported among long-term solitary prisoners. The brain begins preserving dreams as if they are lived experiences because they contain movement, dialogue, faces, interaction. All the stimulation missing from waking life. Ramon dreams of crowded streets, church gatherings, dice games on the corner, laughter, arguments, hugs, noise, glorious noise. But when he wakes up, those memories fade like mist. The dreams feel more real than the day-to-day reality of ADX. Former inmate Hani Sala, held under Special Administrative Measures, SAMS, described it like this in a deposition. You begin to wish you could stay asleep. The dream world becomes the only place where people exist. Ramon starts dreading the moment the lights snap on at 5 a.m. Not because he hates the routine, he's used to that by now. He dreads it because waking up means returning to the silent world where nothing moves, nothing changes, nothing responds. Dreams become a parallel life, and reality becomes the interruption. The security interview. During his 11th week, Ramon is escorted, in handcuffs, leg irons and a belly chain, to a small interrogation room for what officials call a security risk assessment. These interviews are routine for inmates labeled high risk, especially gang-affiliated individuals like Ramon. He's strapped into a restraint chair. 2 officers stand behind him. A counter-terrorism-trained case manager sits across the glass. No threats. No yelling. No intimidation. The indoctrination at ADX doesn't rely on fear. It relies on clinical control. The official asks low, calm questions. Any issues with other inmates? Any thoughts of harming staff or yourself? Do you understand the safety expectations of this facility? Are you prepared to remain compliant? Ramon answers automatically. His voice sounds flat even to himself. The questions blur. The interview is over in 5 minutes. But the worst part happens afterward. When he returns to his cell, something feels off. He realizes he doesn't remember the officer's face. Can't visualize it. Can't picture the color of his uniform. Can't recall the room clearly. The moment he left the environment of isolation, his brain couldn't process the sudden flood of stimuli, the movement, the voices, the lights, so it rejected most of it. This phenomenon is documented in numerous psychological evaluations. Long-term isolation weakens working memory and short-term sensory integration. The world becomes too loud, too bright, too overwhelming. Ramon's cell, once a prison, now feels like the only place where his mind can function normally. And that is the most dangerous indoctrination of all. ADX makes the cage feel safer than freedom. The minds surrender. By week 12, Ramon stops resisting the routine. He stops questioning the silence. Stops thinking about the outside world. Stops trying to imagine faces. He begins moving through each day with mechanical calm, not broken but conditioned. He doesn't rage. He doesn't argue. He doesn't challenge staff. He doesn't think beyond the walls. ADX Florence has taken a man with a history of violence, unpredictability and rebellion, and turned him into someone predictable, quiet and self-contained. Not by force. Not by threats. Not by punishment. But by architecture. By isolation. By silence. By routine. By time. By design. The world thinks ADX is about security. Those who've been inside know. It's about transformation, the kind that never fully reverses. By Ramon's 3rd month inside ADX Florence, he begins to understand a brutal truth whispered in legal filings, mental health evaluations, and rare inmate letters smuggled to the outside world. ADX isn't one prison. It's multiple prisons stacked inside each other. And the deeper you go, the less human you become. The cell he lives in now, cold, silent, isolated, isn't even the harshest version of ADX. There are layers, levels, units so restrictive that lawyers and human rights groups spent years arguing they violate the 8th Amendment. Ramon has heard rumors about these places. Names spoken in low tones even by hardened inmates. Range 13. The Control Unit. SAMS. Those aren't just sections of the prison. They're different psychological universes. And although Ramon isn't there yet, the threat of being moved into one of those deeper levels becomes another tool of indoctrination, a silent warning that obedience isn't optional. Because at ADX, compliance doesn't earn rewards. Non-compliance earns new forms of isolation. Range 13, where time disappears. Range 13 is the most feared unit in ADX Florence. Almost no one outside the system has seen it. It's not on tours. Not described in detail in public documents. But inmates who survived it, men like Thomas Silverstein and Jack Powers, described it in haunting detail. It's a wing built specifically for prisoners considered too dangerous even for ADX. Imagine that. A place too extreme for the most extreme prison in America. Cells in Range 13 have total isolation. No human contact. No outdoor rec, sometimes for years. Constant fluorescent light. Steel mesh layered over steel bars layered over concrete. Doors that block even the smallest noise. Ramon's unit is brutal, but Range 13 is another dimension. Federal records show some inmates there were allowed only one phone call per year. Some spent years without seeing another human face. One former inmate described Range 13 as a place designed to erase a human being without killing him. Even guards who worked those tiers reported that time inside them feels unreal, like a loop with no beginning or end. Ramon doesn't know if he'll ever end up there. but the possibility hangs over every decision he makes. And that knowledge alone changes how a man behaves. The control unit, the psychological furnace. Another layer of ADX's internal structure is the control unit, a program designed for inmates considered management risks, gang leaders, or men with a history of influencing others. In the control unit, inmates are stripped of almost all privileges, isolated even longer, observed under stricter conditions, given fewer books, fewer phone calls, fewer visits, placed in cells with nearly zero visual stimulation. The Bureau of Prisons calls it a behavior modification program. Inmates call it something else. The mind furnace. Because the control unit doesn't just isolate you, it cooks your mind slowly, consistently, clinically. Ramon has heard about it from older inmates in other federal prisons, long before he ever set foot in Colorado. He thought they were exaggerating. He thought no place in America could be that extreme. But now, sitting in his own concrete cell day after day, he knows exactly how real it is. And worse, he knows how close he is to being transferred there if he slips up even once. SAMS, the silence beyond silence. The deepest form of isolation in ADX isn't a location. It's a status. Special Administrative Measures, SAMs. These are restrictions placed on inmates accused of terrorism, espionage, or national security threats. It's not just solitary confinement, it's total communication blackout. Under SAMs, inmates can have their letters monitored word for word, can be banned from speaking to other inmates entirely, can have their calls limited to immediate family only, can be prohibited from sharing information through any channel, can have all personal property reviewed or denied, often go years without access to normal media or general population. Even lawyers representing SAMs prisoners describe the experience as like speaking to someone who lives on another planet. Ramon isn't on SAMs. But knowing such a condition exists, knowing the prison can drop him into that level without warning, keeps him compliant in ways no physical force ever could. At ADX, fear isn't loud. It's administrative. Ramon's descent into routine dependency. Around this point, Ramon notices something frightening. He has become dependent on the routine that once felt torturous. The 5 a.m. light blast? His body now wakes up seconds before it. The 7 a.m. meal slot clank? His stomach grumbles on cue. The weekly shower rotation? He finds himself waiting for it eagerly, not for comfort but for the change in scenery. He used to hate the monotony. Now it frames his entire sense of time. Former ADX inmate Sean Riker once wrote, "After enough months alone you stop wanting freedom. You want predictability. Because predictability feels safe. Predictability feels stable. Predictability feels like the only thing that won't be taken from you." And that is the cruel masterpiece of ADX Florence. The system that imprisons you becomes the same system that stabilizes you. If Ramon were suddenly released into general population at another prison, yard, people, noise, chaos, he wouldn't adapt instantly. He'd fall apart. This is documented, observed, proven in case after case. Some long-term ADX inmates who were transferred to less restrictive prisons had panic attacks in open spaces, froze when too many people were around, became hypersensitive to noise, experienced disorientation in social environments, asked to return to isolation because it felt safer. Isolation had become their normal. Social interaction became the threat. And Ramon feels that shift happening inside him now, slowly, steadily, silently. The first signs of indoctrination. One night around 2 a.m., Ramon wakes up suddenly with a terrifying realization. He hasn't resisted anything in weeks. He hasn't questioned the routine. He hasn't pushed back against the silence. He hasn't even imagined life outside ADX. This is when the indoctrination becomes fully visible, not in how he behaves but in how he thinks. He tells himself, "I'm not like the guys who ended up in Range 13. I just have to follow the program. This is the safest way to live. I don't want trouble. I don't want attention. I don't want them thinking I'm unstable." He recites these thoughts like prayer, unaware that the system has already reshaped him. Because ADX's greatest weapon isn't force or brutality. It's permanence. A system that doesn't need to scream at you, beat you, or threaten you. All it needs is time, silence, isolation, routine. And eventually the prison stops being a place. It becomes a mindset, a second skin, a permanent residence inside the mind. In the end, ADX Florence isn't just a fortress of steel and concrete. It's a psychological labyrinth, one designed to reshape the human mind without ever laying a hand on the body. A place where silence becomes a teacher, and the lesson is obedience. For men like Ramon, and the hundreds who came before him, the punishment isn't what happens inside those cells. It's what follows them long after they leave. Some carry the silence forever. Some fear the sound of crowds. Some break. Some never quite return to who they were. Because ADX Florence doesn't just confine people. It transforms them. And that transformation is something no judge, no jury, and no sentence can fully explain. As you step away from this story and back into your world, with its voices, movement, chaos, and freedom, remember this. Some men are serving life in ADX. Others are serving life from ADX. And for many, the walls never truly come down. If this story opened your eyes to the realities hidden deep within America's most secretive supermax, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It helps bring these buried stories to light, stories most people inside ADX never get the chance to tell. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.